Yo, what's up everybody? It's RJ with Slow Movement. We're at Chris's house again. So today we are going to be putting the head back on his motor. We're also going to be messing with putting the intake on and getting the turbo on. We just put all the new lines and stuff and gaskets on the turbo, and then like test fit the turbo blanket on it inside. So we're going to get on that today. So that way his engine starts to resemble an engine again. And see what else small things we can get done. So stick with us, stay tuned. Alright, so we got the head on. So basically what we did is we used brake cleaner to clean the surface of the block, and then and to kind of wipe the top of the pistons, clean them up as much as we could. Had the dowel pins already in. We put the Apex head gasket on. So we have, in case anybody's like curious, we have this little like screwdriver setup going on for the timing chain. The reason being is we don't want to drop the timing chain back into here, because that's the whole reason it came apart, is it got dropped in there. So we don't have to do that again. So we're taking extra precautions with the rubber bands and the screwdriver to make it so that cannot fall back in there. So it's also like the rubber band thing makes it easier, so you're not trying to, like, when we were putting the head on, I was grabbing the chain through here, and Chris was lowering the head onto the motor. It makes it so you can kind of just have this little rubber band right here to be able to grab and pull through there without like having to slip on the chain or pinch your fingers together. You can have this small little thing to run through the head first and guide the chain through without dropping it through or having issues with that. It makes it pretty simple. So we set the head down, it's on the dowel pins, and so now we're gonna start putting hardware and stuff in for it. So while we're doing these ARP head studs, we are following the MOSWorks instructions on them. So you lube the fine threads that are actually going to go down into the block. You put the lube on there. You don't need a whole lot, just enough to kind of coat the bottom threads, and then as you screw it into the block, it will spread those through the rest of the threads. And then, so in MOSWorks instructions, it does say to like put the washer on the hole and then put the stud in. That was just going to be kind of a hard thing to do, like, or just be kind of annoying. You might drop the washer down in there. So what we do is we put the washer on the stud itself, drop the stud into the hole, and then kind of let the hold the washer, and then kind of let the washer fall down into place. That way it's in the right spot. And then hand thread the stud in, and then we're going to go back through and tighten them. So right now we've done that for all of them, and then Chris right now is kind of checking which size we need for the Allen key. We'll tighten all of them through and then continue from there. So one thing I forgot to mention too is we kind of got ahead of ourselves when we started screwing the studs down into the into the motor. So ARP gives you the nuts as well MOSWorks kit. Or excuse me, MOSWorks gives you the nuts as well to secure the studs. So basically this nut, we're going to put lube on it just like we did the threads on the stud, and then we're going to set it on here. The stud is still loose here, right? So it's not tightened down yet. We're going to slightly, once it would be lubed, I'm going to take this one back off, but for demonstration purposes, you would slightly put that on there, use the Allen key on there, sink it, and then once the stud is all the way down, you would tighten down the nut. It just makes it so basically the stud ends up going down till about here, and so to try and get the nut onto the stud while it's way down there would just be a pain. You may drop something, things like that. So make sure to, while they're up here and like easy working, you know, lube the nut, put it on, and then sink the stud down in there, tighten it down. That way you don't have to try and fight and finagle these nuts, especially in between the springs and things like that. That'd be a real pain. So don't forget that. So as you can see now, like this one right here, you can see how far down. Let me screw this down a little bit more. Once I screw the nut down, you can truly see how far down this stud went with tightening it. So that's how low the stud sits on the head. So you can see now why you wanted to make sure you put those nuts on and start them like this up here on the top before you screw that all the way down, because then it would be a pain to try and finagle that nut like in there without dropping it, you know, down into your timing chain area, without dropping it into the springs or getting it around the springs and things like that. It'll just make your life a lot easier. You know, put the little bit of lube on there, screw it down a little bit, do what Chris is doing, tightening it down. And then the next step, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do 2 torques. The first one at 45 foot-pounds, the second one at 65 foot-pounds. And we're gonna do that. We're gonna pull up the factory manual for the engine, and we're gonna torque them in a specific sequence, which I'll name here in a second once we pull that out. And then, like I said, first one 45 foot-pounds, second one 65 foot-pounds. All right, so according to the manual, I can get in there. All right, so we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we just torque the head down, and then we're gonna take the hydraulic lash adjuster. So basically this thing would normally sit down in that hole. There's one there, and throughout the whole entire head. So we're gonna take that, we have this little Allen key in there. So we're gonna take this, we're gonna dip it in the oil and pull the Allen key out. And basically it's gonna be acting as like a bleeding system. So it's gonna make all the air escape out of that. That way when we put it in the motor, we make sure that it's not like clogged or anything like that. So basically what happens here is you saw like the few air bubbles there that are popping out. So basically the thing is filling with the motor oil. So that way it's filled with oil when we put it back in the motor, and there's no more air left in it. So Chris is gonna poke down in it and then pull that out quickly to kind of see if there's any other air in there and let it escape. What? So basically now he's gone through, he's continued to, pretty much what he's doing is what he said, pushing oil down into it. So now no more bubbles are coming out when he pokes the Allen key down into the hole. That little dimple you see is just pushing is the Allen key on the surface of the oil, but no bubbles are coming out of the actual component itself. So we're gonna finish this one and on to the next one. All right, so we got those filled up with oil. Basically all that does is make it so once we do service the engine with oil at the end of all this, there's not a bunch of air bubbles in the oil that are having to like slowly escape through those over time. Instead, like they already have oil in them, and then a little bit of air bubbles will be in the top of them, and those will pop out when we actually service the engine and they're submerged in it, but it's less air that has to be forced out. So basically we forced the majority of air out and put oil in them. So Chris is dropping these 2 bolts in here, kind of like the last 2 bolts that need to go on for the head. And then we're gonna start actually building up the head with the rocker arm assembly and cams and all that good jazz, and continue on from there. All right, so when we did the parts overview last episode, so basically Chris had this little tool, and so everybody might not have known what it is. So you got the exhaust side and the intake side, I&E, and then inside of it, there are these little marks. So basically that's for this chain link, the silver one, is supposed to line up with this dot on the cam gear. And you know that the cam gear is in line with the actual cam because of the pin that comes through it. So this is just kind of like an extra check pretty much to make sure that when you set this on, the exhaust dots, you got 3 things that line up, the mark, the silver link, and the dot. And then for the intake side, same thing. You got the mark, the silver link, and there's a dot right there. And then same thing, there's a pin that goes into the intake gear from the cam, so you know the cam is in line with the actual gear. All right, so after Chris puts all the assembly lube on each little part of the cam, down there in that little box, we have the cam caps. So then we're just gonna put that over the cams and move on from there. All right, so Chris is putting on the cam angle sensor. He's gonna tighten that down. I'm about to put gasket all the way around. That way we can drop the valve cover on. All right, everyone, so pretty much that's gonna wrap today's episode up. We were gonna put on the intake and exhaust side and turbo, but we ended up deciding, like, all right, let's just get a motor. So valve cover's on. It looks gorgeous with the yellow and the purple. So basically gonna let that sit, and then next episode we will get the intake and turbo on and be putting it in the car. We got a few other small things we gotta take care of too before we put it in the car. But other than that, like, Chris, you happy you got a motor now? Like, together? So, anyways, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment below. Again, I say it every episode, but let us know what you guys want to see next, you know, things you want us to go do. So, other than that, we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.